There is much doom and gloom regarding the year 2030, given the World Economic Forum propaganda video regarding it and what we see moving in that direction. To sum up the ideal 2030 scenario, the ideal for them, not us, I shall focus on information, transport, meat, demographics, and cash. The end goal for them is that they will have a system against which it is literally impossible to rebel. Suppose in 2030 you want to change the system and live outside it or reform it. Can you do this personally, by yourself? Presumably not, but as soon as you try to contact anyone about your great idea, your social media will detect you and shut you down. Your movement will be dead before it starts. If you get past that and try to do things offline, then you will not be able to go as you please. You will go only where and when the public transport, electric cars, autonomous cars, etc. will go. You will have no spontaneous rallies, protests, or marches. Even if you find a way to recruit, inform, organize, and coordinate people, then you will not be able to pay them, pay for material, pay for anything. As soon as your bank account is connected with the rebels, it will be cut off. You tried to buy a bus ticket to go to a rally, and now you cannot pay for your rent or buy food. Supposing you find some way to get a movement going without any communication, travel, or money, you will need to overcome demographics. Society will have so many ethnic factions that some will always be available to act as loyalists for the system. Their presence in your country is a product of the system, so if you are against it, then how can they trust you not to come after them next? Even if you build a coalition strong enough to overcome the system's coalition, you will have an army of sickly people, people without organic meat in their diet, who are on lots of medications, lots of them will be obese, etc. A people who cannot survive long without the system, in other words. They are threatened by disruption to the system, so they cannot disrupt it too much, not enough to change it at any rate. This is the desired goal for 2030 for the system and its overlords. A system in which anyone wanting to change anything cannot communicate their ideas, cannot meet with like-minded people, cannot pay for any materials to effect change, cannot assemble any large group of people, and even if they can, the individuals comprising that group are too weak to act. However, I don't think it will be as bad as this for a few reasons. Key to these people is efficiency. It is not efficient to have to manage and enforce a system. Regarding meat, I imagine that most meat is not bought from a butcher. I bet that most is bought from supermarkets and comes from meat plants in branded packaging. Suppose all that supermarket meat was replaced with lab meat or plant meat, etc., but it looked the same, came in the same packaging from the same brands, cooked the same and tasted about the same. How many people would change their shopping habits? Probably none. Thus, with no enforcement, a country can reduce its meat consumption. Similarly, with the private car, if the towns and cities become smart with everything in walking distance and everything else accessible by fast, reliable, cheap public transport, then who would own a car? A car will not get you anywhere faster than the public transport, yet it requires fuel, tax, insurance, tests, etc. Only those determined to own one will, but most will not be determined. The result is a big reduction in car ownership, but no enforcement. Regarding cash, I already know people who never use cash, even though a cashless system is not in place. The system will continue to make it extremely easy to not use cash, so most people will gravitate to not using it. Only those determined to use it will, but they still will be able to. No ban on cash will be necessary, but almost nobody will use it. It will be almost a cashless society with no enforcement. I also believe that most people will always want a safeguard in case the computer system handling cashless transactions fails, even briefly. On the subject of cash and traceless transactions, I believe that the system and its controllers will want a system of cash to exist, even if hardly anyone uses it, so that they can use it. The CIA, for example, will always want a way to pay people in secret to do nefarious things. I also think that the system will want some cash to exist in society in order to encourage crime. Some level of crime is probably necessary for a healthy society, and having some crime will give the system an excuse to have a police force to use on its intended targets. Regarding demographics and the mixing of populations, I have outlined in previous videos that the system wants to maintain a European population to keep the system going. The immigrants and the immigrant-descended population will dominate the legal and law enforcement sectors so that they are loyal to the system and not to the Europeans. However, there will be European enclaves. At the same time, on a national level, the system will probably achieve its 2030 aim. In terms of communication and free speech, the system may achieve its aim, but I believe that there will always be dissident communications. All censorship will be thwarted for a while, and then it will thwart us, and so on. Thus, in general, it will be perfectly possible to live in a European, rural community with meat and cash and free speech and private cars. It is just that most people will choose to live in the smart system. There is another reason for hope, and it is not because the overlords do not want to waste time and energy enforcing their system if they can get 90% willing uptake. It will instead be a tactical decision. If the system makes it impossible to rebel, then these people will become invisible. For example, if you make it impossible to commit hate speech, then how will you identify the hate speakers? One of them could become head of your hate speech apparatus without you ever seeing them coming. Wouldn't it be easier and safer to permit hate speech outside of the smart city? That way the hate speakers can either live in a restrictive city or in an unrestricted town. Most will move to the town. The hate speakers will be content enough to not cause trouble in the city, and they will be far enough from the city not to influence the people in it. Thus, I believe that though the system wants 100% coverage, it will be much easier to settle for 95 or 90%. If the troublemakers are given the option to fight or flee, then most will flee, so the system will provide somewhere for them to flee. Thus, the top 5% least compliant people every generation will just move outside of the system where they are no threat to it. Therefore, there is a place for us in their 2030 world. It will still be their world, their system, and that will not be good for us, because it will always have the option of turning on us. We should not settle for 90% coverage, but I think that we can have hope that it will not be 100%.